Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's deck. We are Casual Pauper here, and taking a look at a deck that was kind of focused on mechanic and AVR, and that is Soulbound. If you go to puremtgo.com and check out the article, I kind of talk about it a little bit and how the idea came to be and whatnot. Really wanted to get into playing with some of these AVR cards now that it's been on for a little while, and basically, haven't had a chance to really experiment around in Pauper. So, wanted to play around with Soulbond, and this is something, I broke it down on the article there, but it is pretty much heavy into blue and green. There is one red one and one white one with Soulbond, but they are not really anything worth playing. So this is how this deck came to be, the green and blue Soulbond deck. So, we're going to take a look real quick at our creature base. Now, Soulbond creatures are kind of interesting, because you have this interesting mana curve available. You get some small creatures like Wingcrafter and the Nightshade Peddler here, and they come in at a small mana cost. But their abilities, when Soulbound, they're mediocre at best. And I guess that's to be expected because they are at the common rarity, but we do get some good stuff here. The Trusted Force Mage is one of the better ones. It's pretty well costed as far as power to converted mana cost ratio goes, and that gives the Soulbound creature and itself +1/+1. So that's definitely a great thing. I mean, you pay 3 and 2 for stuff like the Rangers and a lot of the land fetch creatures that we see in green, so definitely something that's probably the better of the common Soulbound creatures. The next one is definitely one with the most powerful ability, and that is the Shieldmate. This is a little bit heavy costed for the fact that it is a 2/3 creature, but the fact that the Soulbound creature and itself get hexproof makes it a very, very strong creature. That's why I am running a set of 3. 4 I think it's a little too much just based off of the mana cost alone, but I did definitely want to have at least 3 in there. Now, this is the package I put together, these guys here. As you can see for that, the Nightshade Peddlers are only 2 of because of the Death Touch is good, not great. It's kind of fun to play with. It gives you a lot of options for killing creatures, especially in a a deck that is blue and green and doesn't have options like burn or creature kill in red or black. So the real focus, though, is this card right here, the Flowering Lumberknot. Now, this is a 4-costed creature for a 5/5, and that is fantastic, but you don't get something like that happening without a drawback. Now, the drawback here is that this creature cannot attack or block unless it is soulbound with another creature. So that means that this card, once it's in play, does absolutely nothing unless, of course, you have bonded it with one of these other creatures. So the deck is going to be a little bit creature heavy. You can see I really didn't go overboard with it because there aren't many options. There is the Trampler with Soulbound, but he comes in at a 6 mana converted mana cost, and that's not really where we want to be either. I wanted to keep it kind of low. Pauper can be a relatively fast format, and if you can't keep up with that, then you're going to be struggling big time. So this is the creature package, and it is I would say maybe a little light on Soulbound creatures, but the fact of the matter is there isn't a lot out there that is really worth playing. I felt these 4 were the ones that were, most playable as far as that's concerned, and I don't think I would really change these as far as how many of each. Wingcrafter gives us some nice first turn plays, gets us an early bit of flying. It works really well with, top decking that into, getting that Lumberknot into play on turn 4. Stuff like that, little tiny interactions. It's kind of nice to be able to soulbound a creature with just a 1 cost. So they're good, they bring stuff to the table, but you at the same time don't really want to be going overboard on that. The other creature I did bring in here is Coiling Oracle. I talked about this as one of the options that is probably most likely to be changed if you're going to play this deck. Coiling Oracle is a card that I enjoy. It's a 50-50 chance that when you put it into play, you'll accelerate yourself up 1 land or up 1 card in hand, but your opponent sees what it is. Now, I really like this, but a lot of, because you have these 4 mana costed creatures as really the focus of your deck, having stuff like Mana Dorks and just basic land fetch available to you is very important. This means things like Rampant Growth could be important. Even as a simple Llanowar Elf could be a great option for this deck so that you can get these creatures going as fast as possible. like I said, I like Coiling Oracle. I like the ability. I like the fact that it gives me a draw option as well as an option for land ramp. If you wanted to change it up a little bit, the other option I would recommend is Explore. That does give you the same thing. It does give you an opportunity to land ramp yourself up one card, but at the same time, it's basically going to be a cantrip off the draw. And I think it's kind of a comparable card, though that does reduce your creature count a lot more. I think card draw is kind of important in a deck like this because while it is kind of aggro, it's only running 20 creatures, so it's really trying to be as balanced as possible. There's a lot of stuff you could do to play around with this to make changes. Keeping with the whole focus of the Soulbound thing, I am bringing in a full set of Joint Assault, and this is another fantastic card. This gives the creature, each creature who is in a Soulbound pair, +2/+2. So if you're attacking, you can do all kinds of combat tricks. It's something you can use to block, to kill creatures, to get that extra damage, etc. And the fact that it pumps both of those creatures is really great. If your opponent has one blocker available to him and he blocks one of your creatures, well, the other one is still going to get that damage through. So definitely a great thing to have, but it does leave you opening to bring in other stuff like Mutagenic Growth, any other kind of pump spell that you would want here, Vines of Vastwood, stuff like that. Those are definitely great other options to make this more focused on creatures. You could also bring in a couple more Soulbound creatures if you wanted to go that way as well. Now, I was talking about draw a second ago, and I'm bringing in a full set of Accumulated Knowledge. Now, as a whole, this set will bring you 10 cards if you have played all 4 copies. A lot of people don't exactly care for it. There are other options available to you. This is actually a little bit expensive for a Pauper card, so I understand why people would trade it out. My recommendation would be Think Twice. That is definitely the best alternative available to you. Now, as a whole, Think Twice will get you only 8 cards as opposed to the 10, but you do have some better options as far as being able to use Think Twice, twice in a row, draw 2 cards at once. It spreads out that draw, whereas Accumulated Knowledge, by the time you come to the 4th copy, you're drawing a lot at once instead of, a little bit over several turns. So it's just, based on your play style, how you like to play, draw cards like that, and your ability to fork out $3 a card for Accumulated Knowledge. Now, I wanted to kind of bring in some control options. This is kind of my small package here, and move these around. As far as control goes, obviously being in blue and green, I wanted to bring in some counter spells. It's really the best thing that blue has available to it as far as control goes. There are options for bouncing creatures, bouncing permanents, but I really wanted to bring in the counter spells. Once you bounce something, if you can keep it off the board through a counter spell, it's a 2-for-1, but and that's not great, but at the same time, there's not a lot of options. So the ones I went with is 2 copies of Prohibit and 4 copies of Mana Leak. Now, the key thing to know about these mana spells, and if you want to make changes, is the fact that these come with a 1 colorless, 1 blue cost. Now, if you look at our mana base here, we're almost running 50-50 as far as the lands are concerned, as far as, island to forest ratio. So having that 1 colorless available may be the make or break for this card, because of the fact that you're not always going to have 2 untapped blue mana available to you. A lot of the stuff that we want to play, the Shield Mates, the Wing Crafters, stuff like that, they do require that blue mana, and you're not necessarily going to have 2 of them open at any point in time to get the mana leak out. So it's definitely important to keep that 1 colorless. If you don't care so much about that, feel free to bring in the counterspells, the good old-fashioned counterspells, but I tell you now that you need to be aware of this. It is something that will come up. And the last thing I brought in for a control option is Aether Trade Winds. Now, this is a card that allows you to return a permanent of your own as well as a permanent of your opponent's to their hand, and there's a couple of reasons why I brought this in. Now, as I said, red and black do not give you options as far as creature kill, so you need to kind of rely on blue's ability to bounce stuff, or, some kind of fog or stasis effect in green. Now, the bouncing effect is great and works decently with counterspells, though, as I said, it is going to cost you 2 cards for 1. Excuse me, but the key thing about Trade Winds is the fact that it allows you to return target permanent that you control as well. This works great because it gives you options to replay Coiling Oracles for an extra draw or extra land, and it also gives you some options as far as rearranging your soul bonds. Say I have, a Force Mage and something else in play, and they're bonded together. Now, I can't change that bond unless they are unbonded. So I have to be able to return it, or one of them has to die, so that, say, I play a Lumberknot, and now I can remove that bond from, say, an Oracle to the Lumberknot where it belongs. So it gives you options as far as that's concerned, rearranging bonds. Now, there are some better ways to do that specifically, and most important of those would be Ghostly Flicker, and that allows you to basically blink 2 of your own permanents, and that is a perfect way to, get card draw going off oracles and rearrange bonds instantly. It's just focused. It's gonna honestly keep you on that focus only. It can be used to protect your cards from other things, spells like Doomblade, something like that, but you also have the shield mates, which will give you hexproof, so it's not something that I really wanted to focus on. I liked that Trade Winds gave me the option to rearrange bonds and something else. There are other options. There is another card that was released recently called Peel from Reality that allows you to return a creature you control and a creature your opponent controls. So that's kind of the same thing, and it costs 1 colorless less. It works kind of the same way. It'll allow you to rearrange bonds as well as bouncing your opponent's creatures in a bit of control, but at the same time it is specifically for creatures. If you look at the Trade Winds, it's target permanent. Now, another thing you run into issues with is not being able to handle artifacts and enchantments, which do come up a lot more often when you are playing a casual game. Being able to use the Trade Winds to bounce something like that is great. Like it gives you options beyond your ability to just handle creatures. It gives you options for stuff like Bone Splitters and stuff like that that are also troublesome. So you can also, go old-fashioned with Vapor Snag. That's another great one. It only comes in at a single blue cost and allows you to do 1 damage to your opponent when you do it, but it bounces only creatures there as well. So, there's a lot of options available to you. You could, even if you wanted to, go Boomerang, but that's not a great one. Echoing Truth, stuff like that. Anything you want to really bounce creatures. Being that this is going to try and focus more on Soulbond and the creature aspect, you really want to be using these as your creature control, especially the Lumberknots. Being creative and strong about your blocking and assigning damage and stuff like that is the important way for this deck to win. The only thing I would suggest is maybe, if you really want to focus on this, up your creature count a little more. Playing it a lot, I'm still torn on whether or not I think it needs more creatures, I guess is the way to put it. The creature base is really good. You never run into a problem usually with the Lumberknots and finding a Soulbond creature. The card draw helps out with that, but there's a lot of stuff in this deck that it's just very subjective, I guess is the word. There's a lot of stuff you can do to change it around and really play with it. It's one of these things. I make these decks and I offer all these suggestions for how to change it, but I think out of all the decks that I've put up for you guys so far, this is the one that definitely has the most room for play as far as switching around cards and options. So definitely take it for a run, give Soulbond a chance, give it a play. It's honestly a lot of fun to do these kind of things. Any kind of creature-based strategy I always find is very fun, but being able to decide, what card should pair with what other card gives you a lot of options for kind of changing things up. One game you might have the Peddler as a flying 1/1, and other times it might be hexproof, or it might get extra counters on it or size. It's just the fact that it's not the same thing every time is a lot of fun to me. So I definitely recommend you check it out. Even if you don't like my list, give it a try yourself. Sit down and take out all your Soulbond creatures and see what you come up with.